Hi.
Origin of Life and Theories and Evidences of Evolution Part 2. Theories of Evolution. Biological evolution can be simply defined as the genetic changes in populations of organisms through the time that leads into different changes among them. Evolution has helped us to understand the history of life in a better way. Evolutionary theories usually deal with how life changed after its origin. Regardless of how it started, afterwards it branched and diversified, and most studies of evolutions are focused on those processes. Lamarckism or Lamarck's theory of evolution. A French biologist named Jean-Baptiste de Lamarck published the first truly mechanistic theory of evolution in his book Philosophie Zoologique. According to this theory, the ecological conditions in which an organism lives cause it to have certain needs. These needs are met by modifications of old organs or by production of new rudimentary organs. By continual use of these rudimentary structures, they increase in size and functional capacity, and by disuse, they may be degenerated and become lost. Character changes brought out by the environment during the life of an individual becomes hereditary and can be transmitted to the next generation. Based on his theory, Lamarck constantly believed that cave fish are often blind because their ancestors had lived for several generations in dark conditions, and in each generation the eyes had progressively degenerated through lack of use. The long neck of modern giraffe could be explained by the Lamarckian theory. When there was abundant amount of food available for the giraffes, they need not stretch their necks. But there was a time when the food became scarce, so the short-necked ancestors needed to stretch their necks to get leaves higher up in the trees. In this way, they stretched their necks, and in each generation the exercising of neck in this fashion caused an increment in length of the neck, which became genetically fixed. However, Lamarck's theory was unsupported as it did not provide any scientific evidence. Later, Charles Robert Darwin, an English naturalist, came up with an idea of natural selection. According to this, all species have evolved over time from one of few common ancestors through the process of natural selection. Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection was based on various principles. The first principle was the variation existed among individuals of a species. The second principle was scarcity of resources in a population would lead to competition between individuals of the same species, causing a struggle for existence. Such a competition would lead to death of some individuals while the others would survive. These individuals that would survive would have advantageous variations and would reproduce and would be more advantageous for the survival of the fittest. Let's take an example of giraffe. During the time when the food was abundant, both the giraffe, that is shorter necked, and the longer necked giraffe, both were able to have their food. But as the time passed and there was a scarcity of food, the leaves were present only on the top of the tree. This would cause only the longer necked giraffe to be able to have its food, but the shorter necked giraffe was left hungry. Due to this, the longer necked individuals had undergone adaptation. After many generations of this selective processes, the descendant population has a much longer average neck length. After Mendel's laws were rediscovered and genetic variations were shown to be generated by mutation, Darwinism and Mendelism were used as framework of what we call as Neo-Darwinism. According to this theory, although mutation is recognized as the ultimate source of genetic variation, natural selection is given the dominant role in shaping the genetic makeup of populations and in the process of gene substitution. In this image, you can see the differences between Darwinism and Neo-Darwinism. You can pause the video to read it. Galapagos Islands and Darwin's finches. Galapagos Islands are a cluster of 29 volcanic islands and islets of different sizes lying on the equator in the Pacific Ocean. All of the organisms that occur on these islands have reached there by crossing the sea as a result of chance dispersal in the water by wind or by transport via another organism. Darwin's finches are a group of 14 species of small birds, 13 of which occur on the Galapagos Island. This group of birds provide one of the most striking and best studied example of evolution on the islands. Scientists believed that the Galapagos finches descended from an ancestral species that occasionally inhabited the mainland of South America. On these new islands, these immigrant birds would become adjusted to the local conditions through the process of natural selection. The descendants of the original finches that reached the Galapagos Islands now occupy many different kinds of habitats on the islands. In doing so, they would have become progressively more different from the original population. The most obvious difference between the finches relates to the dietary adaptation and is reflected in size and shape of their beaks. The finches of Galapagos Islands provide an example of adaptive radiation, the formation of new forms from an ancestral species, usually in response to the opening of new habitats. Among the 13 species of Darwin finches that inhabit the Galapagos Island, there are three main groups: ground finches, tree finches, and warbler finches. Ground finches. There are 6 species of ground finches. Most of the ground finches feeds on seeds of different sizes. The size of their beaks is related to the size of the seeds on which the birds feed. Tree finches. There are 6 species of tree finches belonging to several diverse groups. These species also differ from another primarily in beak size and shape, which reflect adaptations to their food. 4 species have beaks that are suitable for feeding on insects. The ones with larger beaks feed on larger insects, and those with smaller beaks feed on smaller insects. Warbler finches. This unusual bird differs from the ground finches and the tree finches in its habitats and morphological adaptation. The warbler finch plays the same ecological role in the Galapagos woods that warblers play on the mainland. Evidences of evolution. Homology and development. The wings of the bird and the forelimbs of a bat are examples of homologous structures. Homologous structures are structures that are derived from a common ancestor. Even if they are superficially different, they are developmentally related. Homology does not mean that these structures must share the same function. A character shared between 2 species but not present in their common ancestors is called homoplasy. Or in other words, homologous organs can be defined as the structures that have similar function but show variations in the structural theme. Here in the image you can see homology between the forelimbs of 4 mammals, showing the ways in which the proportions of their bones have changed in relation to the particular way of lifestyle. However, very often in nature we find structures that are superficially similar even though the organisms are completely unrelated to one another. These structures may even serve the same function, like flying, and described as analogous structures. Another evidence of evolution is during embryonic development of organism, the embryo exhibits characteristics of embryos of its ancestors. For example, early in their development, human embryos possess gill slits like a fish and later exhibit a tail. These relict development forms suggest strongly that our development has evolved. Another evidence of evolution is the presence of vestigial structures. Vestigial structures are those structures that do not serve any apparent function. The examples of vestigial organs are the presence of pelvic bones in snakes and whales, and the presence of rudimentary eyes in some cavefish species. Other examples are the presence of nictitating membrane in humans, wisdom teeth, goosebumps, appendix, etc., and the presence of pseudogenes throughout the genomes of eukaryotes. Another important evidence is fossil records. Fossils are the preserved remains or traces of organisms from the distant past. The fossil record remains first and foremost among the databases that document changes in the past life on the earth. Natural selection. Selection is a composite of all forces that cause differential survival and differential reproduction among genetic variants. When the selective agencies are primarily those of human choice, the process is called artificial selection. When the selective agencies are not those of human choice, it is called natural selection. Natural selection is the non-random process by which biological traits become more or less common in population as a function of their differential reproduction or differences in the rate of survival. This is an example of natural selection. Here you can see many beetles are present on the wood. Some are green in color and some are orange in color. The crows or the birds feed on the green ones because they are more visible on the wood. As the green beetles were more visible on wood, these were more attacked than the orange ones. So the count of the orange ones kept on increasing, whereas the count of the green ones kept on decreasing. And the time comes when the green beetles had completely finished and the brown beetles had flourished. In this way, there was a natural selection of beetles. Evidences of natural selection. Industrial melanism. Industrial melanism is a phenomena that is used to describe the evolutionary process in which initially light-colored organisms or populations become dark as a result of natural selection. It affected over 70 species of moths in England. The name of the moth was peppered moth or Biston betullaria. During Industrial Revolution, soot and other industrial waste darkened tree trunks and killed off lichens because light-colored pepper moths rely on camouflage to avoid predation. This sudden change in their environment made them highly vulnerable to predators. In course of time, the light-colored moth became rare and the dark-colored moth became abundant. The cause of this change was thought to be selective predation by birds, which favored camouflage coloration in the moth. Another example is the evolution of drug resistance of HIV. Sexual selection. Darwin observed that there are some characteristics that do not appear to increase the survival fitness of an organism, and thus not explained by natural selection. However, these traits are concerned with increasing the mating success of an individual. For example, the peacock's train or tail is one of the such example. A peacock could fertilize a female even without his remarkable tail, and in that sense it is not essential sexual organ. On the other hand, the peacock's tail reduces the male's survival fitness as the tail reduces power of fight, and its growth also imposes an energetic cost. Sexual reproduction occurs in two main ways, that is, mate competition and mate choice. If you liked my video, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.